Hi everyone, and I'm pleased to be moderating this session. A lot of interesting questions that we're going to walk through. Maybe we could go around and just start with a quick round of very high level introduction.
Yeah, thanks, Sachin. I'm dialing in from Delhi, India, so sharing that common slot with Murli. As an introduction, I lead a group called the Global Development and Delivery Center. In short, we call it GDC within NEC Corporation India, and it's a team of around 1,300 and growing by the day. Kind of a talent around software development, engineering, productization, and customization of applications, in various use cases and fields and domains in the industry. Typically, my team is focused in terms of supporting all the project developments and deployments and delivery and after market support for the solutions which NEC brings to its customers globally. So, you would be aware of the theme which NEC is known for, which is basically orchestrating a brighter world. So in the truest sense of this uh, vision, NEC strongly propagates the idea of bringing social value through technology. And all the work which we do, across industry, across the globe, are fundamentally in some shape or form, targeted around, bringing a better society in terms of the way we leverage technology to live our daily lives or to make the world a better place to live and work. Typically, as an example, I would say that we are operating in the space of let's say retail automation, digital finance, smart manufacturing. Obviously these all incorporate technologies which are IoT, blockchain, the underlying fundamentals. We are very heavily focused in NEC on technologies like 5G, which is the next wave of the telecom growth, which will see typically a very connected space, which is to a large extent kind of infrastructure, I would say, agnostic. That's the power of 5G which it brings in. So net, that's the kind of space in which we are, and we are typically looking at areas to develop fundamental technology expertise and in domains which impact societal values. A bit of my personal background, I also share another common streak with Murli. I spent 10 plus years with Accenture, in various roles and across geographies before I joined in NEC. Um, and I've been with NEC for over a year now, in the role which we play in the Global Development Center. Thanks so much.
Debanjan, would love to understand your perspective on how NEC looks at hackathons, because you operate across as a company, you operate across a wide variety of segments, right? So there is a larger strategy, a larger goal, of innovation, and according to you, where do hackathons fit in that larger strategy?
So yes, Sachin. So one of the very fundamental ethos of NEC is we emphasize on an open innovation model, right? And that essentially means that it brings in entrepreneurs, startups, academia, as well as domain experts on a single common platform. So we see hackathons as one of the fundamental levers of innovation. While that's not the only lever, but there are other levers which we are running within the organization. But hackathon plays a very important role in this particular space, and we have always tried to involve domain experts when we kind of get into this. Case in point, we have recently run a hackathon on rural education inclusiveness in January this year, which included the top management from the organization which is Common Services Center, Government of India initiative, as well as professors from IIT Delhi as jury members, and transportation hackathon which we ran recently had jury members from our headquarters transportation division, the India business unit of NEC, and even the chairperson of TRIPP, Professor Tiwari. So this actually ensures that we ask the right questions to validate the feasibility, the authenticity of some new solution ideas. So largely speaking, big multi LOB corporations can get very bureaucratic at times when it comes to new product, new solution development. With the approach on hackathons, we can still maintain the agility of a startup, through such open innovation approaches. And that's where hackathon becomes a key lever to bring in the innovation culture in NEC.
That's a very interesting perspective, right? Like you said, for large organizations, agility is probably one of the harder things to crack purely because of the size and scale at which they operate. And hackathons are a great way to, kind of get that going at with very, I would say, relatively less amount of effort. And also the fact that hackathons are a way with which you can engage with external audiences. So it's a good way to probably get people who are outside the ecosystem in the ecosystem and get them involved. Are hackathons just another out of the box channel for you to meet whatever needs you leverage hackathons for, or is it a critical component of your strategy? And I know we did touch upon that in the previous response, but specifically on this, like, would you continue doing, if I were to put it another way, would you do it for the next 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, whatever is your horizon for strategy? So what's your thought on that?
Absolutely, Sachin. Absolutely. So, bottom line is that hackathons are not just another medium or channel to meet hiring objectives. Hackathons are the emphasis is on co-creation. That's the main intent of running the hackathons. Hack events helps us to bring in a fresh perspective from the perspective of the project teams which we are running, sometimes with low resource count. Obviously they can't focus on several domains in parallel. So the hackathons bring in a fresh perspective and help realize the MVP quickly. For example, for one of our food tech hackathons, our teams got acquainted on how to utilize near infrared spectroscopy for contactless food crop ripeness assessments. Now, this might be common knowledge for food technologies, but it was new to the project teams within our group, right? And now we could use to leverage this domain expertise in a cost-effective fashion. And for the participants, it became their big opportunity to showcase their skills and generate interest from let's say Japan-oriented companies, JOCs. So sometimes coming across promising ideas might be a little obscure. Sometimes it does sound vague, but definitely worth the effort. So from a co-creation perspective, it's absolutely a win-win overall.
How do you look at an organization like NEC? How do you look at hackathons as a way to just hire talent, right? Is that part of the strategy, or is just mostly an outcome of everything else that you're leveraging hackathons for?
It is a part of the strategy, and it becomes very relevant, Sachin, in the current times as well. Given the market situation. So we have been conducting an NEC hackathons almost once every quarter since 2019, and typically they serve a purpose of it becomes a great filter for us. Typically NEC as a standard practice goes for either lateral hiring or hires from prominent T schools and B schools like IITs and IIMs. But through the hackathons, we bring in a highly effective skill assessment model, which is time bound, and we can then access a much broader and diverse talent pool. And for college freshers, for entrepreneurs, it becomes a great avenue to showcase their skills. And for them, it becomes an excellent platform to get connected with large brands like NEC, Mitsubishi, etc. It is not the biggest source to attract experienced hires. For an example, we won't get data scientists, expert data scientists via hackathons, but it is absolutely certainly valued for certain pockets of new hires and getting acquainted with new startups, entrepreneurs. Most talent are associated for internship and contractual positions initially, and based on further assessment on performance, they are eventually absorbed and onboarded within the group. So it's a great positive hackathon experience. It also generates a positive branding loop for NEC, which in turn then completes the cycle to help attract more competent and skilled resources.
So you touched upon something interesting, and that's talent branding, like branding, right? So what role do you think hackathons play in the whole talent branding aspect, right? Like, where do they fit in? Does it have a material impact? Is it a long-term impact? And how should recruiters in the audience, because talent brand is something that recruiters are thinking about all the time. So when they're trying to solve that problem, how should they look at hackathons as a tool to potentially address that?
You see, as I said, that we have been conducting hackathons almost once a quarter. Obviously something in there has clicked for us and worked for us. In terms of how this helps us to kind of materially brand talent is when you are conducting hackathons, the idea you propagate is get an idea or get a seed of ideas around creating a particular set of MVPs. And when you do that through the talent groups which are participants in the hackathon, when they get recognized and awarded, and if they're eventually also onboarded within NEC as a group, I mean, they then are brand ambassadors of hackathon as an important tool in kind of spreading the word around for the next hackathon, getting more kind of people from startups, from entrepreneurships to come and join those hackathons. So it becomes a fairly tight cycle, or a circle and a cycle at the same time, which continues to generate on its own strength more and more positive developments around talent branding, as well as onboarding skilled people
with specific customers, particularly larger organizations, because creating a bind, like you could still create a bind at the top level, but getting people to actually do things is its own battle in itself. So this could be a great way to kickstart that. So Debanjan, moving to you, how does NEC look at hackathons as a way to evangelize its own solutions, or is it primarily around like getting interesting ideas and solutions on problem statements? So are you also trying to expose certain technology stack as part of these hackathons?
Yes, Sachin, to an extent, yes, we also leverage hackathons as a strategy to do our product campaign and product evangelism. As I started off in my introduction, one of the themes or the main vision of NEC is orchestrating a brighter world, which essentially means we are looking at leveraging technology, AI, analytics, etc., for social impact. And when it comes to the society, some of the sectors which hold the potential to make this impact are either largely prioritized on the lower side or ignored. And they have not seen fairly active participation from some of the technology big players. Right? So therefore, these stress domains, while they are not big money-making avenues in the Indian context, especially, it is an excellent path for us to be able to use hackathons to take our pitch in terms of the technologies we are building in these segments, for example in rural education, rural affordable healthcare, or public transportation delivery, where crowdsourcing innovation on these themes, not just technology solutions but also for the business model, for the revenue stream modeling, hackathons is a great way to kind of get it there, out there. Add to that the fact that when for some of these segments where we are trying to build technologies, where our in-house experts exhibit some restrictive thinking, because they are mostly led by client apprehensions or some of the regulatory hurdles, or rely on past success as themes. So external ideas through hackathons and through participants in the hacks help us explore far better and take these ideas and products mainstream.
One of the use cases that we've seen for hackathons is that they can also be used to internally upskill your own dev community, your internal dev community. So this is not outside, this is like inside, because you want to maybe introduce new technology, or you want to encourage people to solve problems in an innovative way. So anyone who wants to kind of talk about if they've had an experience of doing that, and what were some of your key takeaways?
From my perspective in NEC, we haven't really largely focused on hackathons as a way of internal upskilling. I'll be honest about that. We have
Mhm.
other avenues, like we run the program called Ignite, which is NEC India's open innovation portal and a forum where people kind of innovate and drop in their ideas. Um, so not a lot of experience on internal upskilling as far as why we are hackathons.
What kind of executional challenges have you experienced while conducting hackathons?
Sachin, I think that's a great question. Fundamentally, there are two kinds of challenges. One is, you have to filter through a lot of applicants to identify which are those promising ideas or teams. So only about, I think, 10 to 15% teams shortlist for the online round. Typically, let's say around 6 teams out of 150 applicant teams on an average make it to the final round. So the whole exercise of sieving through the applications and identifying those ideas is a task by itself. Exploration is confined to what can be done in a room or online, and virtual hackathons have actually impeded execution ability for some of the participants. For example, hardware-heavy demos, do take a beating. They suffer most, when it comes to virtual hackathons. Also, an aspect is, you need a good idea as a good enough idea to progress ahead. So typically, an idea plus execution plus feasibility, that whole blend is important. When you look at what is the success of a particular outcome in the hackathon. So a good idea and a bad team doesn't work. A mediocre idea and a good execution, well, maybe yes, it works because you have the know-how to sell the solution well. Obviously, a good idea plus a good execution team within the stringent timelines, these would be our typical targets. Right? Sometimes we see that student teams need more mentoring, as they often exclude the practical challenges while devising a solution. Experienced professionals or serial entrepreneurs handle that aspect better. So we need to be a bit more sensitive, empathetic, maybe a bit less harsh with novice participants in a hackathon. So these are the things we typically look out for when we look at how do we execute a hackathon.
And how do you measure success? They
Well, it's been an interesting journey and a learning experience for us in NEC. Close to the quarterly 15 hackathons we have run in terms of how our definition of success has probably got a bit matured as we have been running hackathons and realizing how do we define success. So initially we started off with the application count. The more the number of applicants, you 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 define that as a quantum of success. But we quickly realized that it is a false narrative. Because sometimes, as Murli said, some of the themes could be fairly broad based, and you would have a lot of applications, and then it will make the initial screening tough enough, right? So eventually we chose to keep the problem statements very specific, very precise, to attract more quality applicants, versus the initial success measure of quantity, right? And you know and from there comes the idea that the emphasis now on how do you measure the success is identifying 2 to 3 actionable concepts or ideas which can be subsequently explored within NEC or their partnering entities. And these ideas need to be able to address a large problem or at least a large business opportunity. And the solutions should be differentiated, or adhere to a blue ocean strategy, right? So the more those kind of themes which we are able to kind of successfully run and get results from the hackathon, that's the way we kind of now define what is the measure of success for the hackathons which we run. We also realized that doing everything over a weekend could be an issue, as Murli also pointed out on that. So for the successful teams which come out of these hackathons, we then use the time after the hackathons to do a bit of polishing with these teams on their ideas and the business side of things in terms of the revenue model, assessing whether it can be run sustainably. So we often work with the winning teams after the hackathon is concluded to mentor them and develop a marketable solution. Case in point, we did this for our transportation segment solutions, and also in agri-tech where we did crop disease detection. So, uh, you know, short of this is that the measure of success is basically around actionable ideas which can be converted to tangible, marketable solutions.
how did NEC come to when you did the first hackathon? What was the internal dialogue? How were the various stakeholders convinced? And obviously you would have taken it to Japan and head office. So what case was built there?
Um, it has been again, it has been a bit, I would say, methodical as far as we have been able to convince our stakeholders internally. Uh, Very typically in NEC, the way we are structured is that the ideation and the research happens predominantly across the labs which NEC has globally. And in India, we have one of these labs, which is NEC Labs India. So they do the product research, or the solution research and ideation. Then it goes into incubation and productization, which is where there's a core team which does that, and then onwards to delivery and software development and deployment. So one of the very early things which we did was these experts from our research labs, they went in as jury members and observers in other industry sponsored hackathons, like NASSCOM's mobility challenge, right? And we observed the success of other tech players running hackathons and accelerator programs, and that kind of helped us getting some stakeholder buy-in internally in terms of running our own very first hackathon, right? And once we did the first one in 2019, on an experimental basis, from that, the success, of that hackathon and the turnaround was compelling enough in our minds to choose and develop that into a full-fledged practice later on, which then now has, yielded, the per quarter one hackathon kind of a target which we are running.
And you, Dave, like what kind of buy-in had you or involvement you needed from your own tech teams internally to run, because you're doing every quarter, right? It's a very high cadence.
Yeah. So I
How
think,
have you
Sachin,
experienced?
taking a cue from what Murli just kind of mentioned, hopefully over a period of time we have got better at it. As we see now, the dependency on tech teams is not huge in NEC. Typically the initial evaluations are performed by the jury, members comprising of people from NEC Labs India, which I mentioned, some of the relevant business members from India and Japan headquarters, and obviously the domain experts. Yeah. The jury members themselves possess enough hands-on and domain as well as technology experience to perform the initial assessments. Right now, going to the next level, when in terms of validating the tech idea and performing feasibility tests around larger scale models or sustainability, therein we require the technology teams to play a larger role. However, we reserve those detailed tests for a later time, when we are willing to take the experimentation to the next level. So from an initial, running the hackathon perspective, I think the way we are right now organized, the jury itself is capable of being able to run it and kind of take the initial assessments through.
Any advice from you before we end the session?
Yeah, Sachin. So I think the question you had was some of the key do's and don'ts when you're conducting your
Right.
hackathons. So I think so. One of the areas is especially for hackathons which are driving AI or analytics-led themes. If the organizer is planning to share some data sets, either actual or simulation data, please ensure that they have an uninterrupted access to the data without compromising on the infosec and privacy policies of the stakeholders at hand. I think that's a clear do and a don't on the infosec and the privacy policy. I think the other large thing which I would say in terms of a outlook is not everything can be done in house. So we at least make sure we collaborate with the prominent partners who have the wherewithal to organize this and pull this off. HackerEarth has been one of our preferred platforms to conduct hackathons since a long time now. So I think not everything can be done in house. So collaboration is the key as well.
Thank you so much, Dave.
Orchestrating a brighter world, NEC.